The great halls of Kortal shimmered with light drawn from the stars themselves. Crystal pillars rose into the vaulted ceiling, refracting the glow of the nearby sun until it seemed as though the entire chamber burned with an inner fire. Banners of 100 worlds swayed gently in the artificial breeze, and the murmur of voices from across the galaxy echoed against the marble floor. It was the assembly of the Galactic Council, a gathering older than most civilizations. Here, alliances were formed, wars averted, and entire species debated their place in the ever-expanding web of stars. Every delegation brought their finest, their wisest, and above all, their most intimidating. Armored guards stood tall, ceremonial weapons gleaming in the light, their presence a reminder that peace was maintained not just with words, but with power. And then the humans arrived. The sound of footsteps echoed clearly across the chamber floor. They were not armored steps, not the heavy march of soldiers. They were simply the calm, steady steps of a man dressed in a plain black suit. Diplomat Elias Kane walked with measured confidence, hands clasped loosely behind his back, his expression composed and unreadable. He carried no weapon, no shield, no visible protection at all. Gasps rippled through the chamber. On worlds where even merchants traveled with armed escorts, the idea of sending an unguarded representative was unthinkable. To many, it seemed either foolish or deliberately insulting. But Kane was not entirely alone. At his side walked a woman of sharp bearing, dressed not in robes or gowns, but in a tailored jacket, dark and simple. Commander Adrian Voss did not wear the ceremonial armor others flaunted, yet there was something about her posture, the steady way her eyes scanned every corner of the hall, that drew quiet attention. She spoke not a word, yet her silence carried weight. Where Kane seemed to embody calm diplomacy, she carried the presence of someone who had seen storms before and stood unshaken. The Kareth delegates were the first to scoff. Towering figures, clad in bronze-plated armor, their crests raised high, they thrived on demonstrations of strength. To them, Kane appeared fragile, laughably unprotected. One of their number leaned close to another and muttered in their guttural tongue, the words, carrying just enough for others nearby to hear. "Earth sends a child to do a warrior's work." Kane did not respond to the whisper. Instead, he continued forward until he stood before the great circle of council seats. The presiding speaker, a serene figure of the Ashari, raised a slender hand and signaled for silence. Slowly, the murmurs died away, leaving only the hum of energy conduits beneath the floor. "Representative of Earth," the speaker intoned, voice flowing like music. "You come before this council as a newly recognized member of our union. Present yourself." Kane inclined his head respectfully. "I am Elias Kane, envoy of Earth and voice of humanity. I thank the council for granting me this place among you." His words were steady, his tone formal, yet unforced. He did not bow too low, nor did he carry the arrogance some feared from younger civilizations. Still, the absence of visible defense remained a point of fascination. From the corner of his eye, Kane could see Voss shifting slightly, not in nervousness but in readiness. He knew her well enough to understand the truth. Her gaze had already measured every exit, every guard's stance, every possible weapon within reach. To others, she was merely an aid. To him, she was assurance. Around them, the council members exchanged glances. Some saw boldness in Earth's envoy, others saw recklessness. The Kareth saw opportunity, but none, not yet, understood the reality that stood quietly beside Elias Kane. The unspoken truth that Earth never entered a hall unguarded, even when the guard appeared to be nothing more than a silent companion. The first test was about to come, though Kane could already feel the weight of judgment in the stares around him. Humanity's place in the stars would not be decided by wealth or weapons. It would be decided by whether their voice could carry meaning here, in the chamber of countless worlds. And Cain, calm as the stillness before a storm, intended to ensure that it did. The chamber's glow dimmed slightly as the Kareth delegation rose to speak. They were towering figures, each muscle outlined beneath their burnished armor, crests, raised high like jagged crowns. Their voices carried a deep resonance, every word meant to remind the others of their power. For centuries, the Kareth had built their reputation on conquest, and they had little patience for species that chose the path of negotiation over dominance. Their leader, Vorek, leaned forward, claws tapping slowly against the railing of his podium. "So, this is humanity," he said, his voice low and rumbling. A fragile form dressed in cloth, with only words as its weapons. We had expected more. The words spread like sparks through the chamber. A few envoys chuckled softly while others exchanged uneasy glances. Many races had endured Kareth arrogance before, and yet it was rare to see them so dismissive so quickly. Cain remained still. He adjusted the cuff of his sleeve, his expression calm. "Humanity comes with respect for this council," he said evenly. "We do not arrive with blades drawn or with challenges on our tongues. Our strength lies in what we build together, not what we destroy." It was a statement of principle, but to the Kareth, it sounded like weakness. Vorek's eyes gleamed. "Strength lies in the ability to defend one's words with one's life," he growled. "If your people cannot show this, perhaps you do not belong here at all." The murmurs rose again, and this time a ripple of tension spread. The council chamber was meant for diplomacy, not violence, but traditions of ritual challenge were still honored among many warrior cultures. Vorek was invoking one now, knowing the council could not easily dismiss it. Elias Cain's gaze did not waver. "We honor the traditions of others," he said, his voice steady. "But Earth does not seek contests of violence to prove its worth. We believe in reason." Vorek's grin widened, sharp and humorless. "Then allow me to demonstrate reason to you." Without warning, one of the Kareth warriors moved. He had been standing at Vorek's side, armored and silent until that moment. Now he strode forward with frightening speed, his clawed hand gripping the hilt of a plasma blade. The weapon hissed to life in a surge of pale light, casting long shadows across the chamber floor. Gasps erupted from the council seats. Formal challenges were one thing, but to strike at a diplomat directly was nearly unthinkable. Nearly, but not impossible. The Kareth believed no one would dare intervene. The warrior lunged, his blade arced downward, its edge glowing with searing energy. Every eye in the chamber turned to Cain, expecting to see fear, or at least a desperate attempt to flee. But Elias Cain did not move. He stood as still as stone, his hands still clasped loosely behind his back. His gaze remained fixed forward, as though the lunging Kareth were nothing more than a shadow crossing his path, and then the shadow met resistance. A blur of motion passed before Cain. The sound of metal striking metal rang out, sharp and final. The plasma blade sputtered and faltered, its strike diverted mid-swing. The Kareth warrior staggered, his momentum broken, his weapon suddenly useless in his grip. Standing between Cain and the attack was Commander Adrienne Voss. Her hand gripped the wrist of the Kareth with unyielding strength, her other arm raised to block the strike. The chamber fell into silence, the only sound the faint hum of the disabled blade. Voss's eyes met the warrior's, calm and unwavering. She did not speak. She did not need to. Her presence spoke enough. The Kareth growled and attempted to wrench his weapon free, but Voss shifted her stance with practiced precision. In a single fluid motion, she twisted his arm, forcing the blade from his grip, and sent him crashing to the polished floor. The weapon clattered uselessly beside him. Gasps spread through the council chamber. Some delegates rose to their feet. Others leaned forward, stunned. The human diplomat had not even flinched, and his so-called aide had disarmed a Kareth warrior in less than a breath. Elias Kane remained perfectly composed. He adjusted his cuff again, as though brushing away invisible dust. Only then did he turn his head slightly, offering a calm nod of thanks to Voss. Vorek's claws dug into the railing, his eyes narrowing with fury. What had been intended as a demonstration of Kareth's superiority had become something far more dangerous. A revelation. Humanity might speak softly, but it did not stand unguarded. And for the first time the council began to see the quiet woman at Kane's side, not as an aide but as something else entirely. The council chamber stood frozen in silence. The Kareth warrior lay sprawled on the floor, his plasma blade skittering across the polished surface before fading into a dim spark. Above him stood Commander Adrienne Voss, her stance balanced, and ready, one hand raised in case he dared to rise again. What stunned the chamber most was not the outcome. It was the speed. One moment the Kareth warrior had been mid-strike, his blade descending with the force of a predator, certain of victory. The next, he was broken on the floor, staring upward in shock. Many envoys had not even seen Voss move. Vorek, leader of the Kareth, slammed his claws against the railing. His voice rumbled like thunder. "This is an outrage. A mere attendant lays hands upon a warrior of my people." The presiding speaker of the Ashari rose gracefully, her eyes narrowing in disapproval. "An outrage, perhaps, but not by humanity," she said. "Your warrior attempted to strike an envoy under the protection of the council. Had the commander not acted, we would now have blood staining these floors." The words carried weight, and many delegates nodded in agreement. Even so, the Kareth leader's fury did not diminish. His warrior staggered to his knees, clutching. His injured arm, humiliation etched across his face. Voss did not advance. She did not taunt. She stood still, her hands relaxed at her sides, her breathing calm and measured. Her eyes, however, never left the Kareth. In their unblinking focus lay a message clearer than any insult. If he tried again, she would end it faster than before. Elias Kane stepped forward, breaking the silence with his measured voice. "The council asked for humanity's envoy," he said, his words calm but carrying. "Here I stand. My duty is to speak. My aide's duty is to ensure that words may be heard before blades are drawn. She has fulfilled that duty." The chamber buzzed with quiet discussion. Some envoys leaned toward one another, whispering speculation. The humans had entered with only two figures. No guards, no weapons, no ceremonial strength. Yet this single aide had stopped a Kareth warrior's strike in less time than it took to draw breath. Vorek's voice cut through the whispers. "This was trickery," he spat. "You present a warrior disguised as a servant. You insult the council by hiding your true strength." Kane regarded him with calm composure. "We insult no one. Earth sends diplomats to speak for its people. Yet history has taught us never to leave our words undefended. Every envoy has a guardian, not a retinue, not an army, just one." The simplicity of the statement carried more weight than if Kane had shouted. He had not denied the truth, nor had he boasted of Voss's skill. He had spoken as though this arrangement were as natural as breathing. The presiding speaker inclined her head slightly, her voice smooth. "Then Earth is wise. A diplomat's words mean little if silenced by violence. The protection you bring is justified." Vorek's claws clenched tighter against the railing, but even he could see the mood of the chamber shifting. His attempt to humiliate humanity had turned into a demonstration of their resolve. The Kareth were known for brute strength, yet here stood a species that had revealed its defense only when pressed, and had done so with precision and restraint. Meanwhile, Adrienne Voss finally stepped back, her stance easing into stillness. Once more. She had not spoken a single word, yet her presence dominated the chamber. Some envoys found themselves studying her, wondering what kind of training could shape such calm, controlled power. Others began to question humanity itself. If this was only one guardian, chosen to accompany a diplomat, then what did the rest of Earth's protectors look like? The Kareth warrior, humiliated, returned to his leader's side, his pride wounded more deeply than his arm. Cain offered, him not a glance. His attention remained on the council. Earth does not seek conflict, Cain said simply. But if tested, we will respond. Not with bluster, not with boasts, with resolve. The presiding speaker's gaze swept across the delegates, her expression unreadable. Then let this council take note, she said at last. Humanity enters not as prey, nor as aggressor, but as one who values peace while standing ready to guard it. Their envoy has spoken. Their guardian has acted. The judgment belongs to us all. A ripple of acknowledgement passed through the chamber. Humanity had not only survived its first challenge, it had left a mark that none would forget. And as Cain resumed his place in the circle, Adrienne Voss stood silently beside him, her eyes steady, her expression calm. To the council, she was no longer just an aide. She was the living embodiment of a truth whispered across the chamber. Humanity did not walk alone. The silence that followed the failed strike lingered like smoke. Every envoy seated in the towering ring of the chamber could still feel the tension thrumming in the air, as though the echo of violence had left its imprint on the polished floor. The Kareth warrior had returned to his place, humiliated and sullen, his crest lowered in shame. His leader Vorik, however, was far from subdued. His voice thundered across the chamber. This is unacceptable. The humans mock us with games of deceit, hiding soldiers beneath the mask of servants. If they believe themselves equal to the council, let them prove it openly, not with ambushes and cowardice. Several envoys frowned at his words. They had seen the truth as clearly as anyone. The Kareth warrior had struck first. The human guardian had merely acted to prevent murder in a hall where violence was forbidden. Yet Vorik's fury was unyielding, his pride too deeply wounded to allow retreat. Elias Cain remained calm. His posture never changed, his hands folded loosely before him. He allowed Vorik's words to crash and echo like waves breaking uselessly against rock. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured and steady. Humanity is guilty of no deceit. You struck first. We defended. That is the beginning and the end of this matter. Vorik leaned forward, his teeth bared in a grim approximation of a smile. Then let the defense be tested. A duel. My warrior against your guardian. Let the council see what humanity truly has to offer, without tricks and sudden strikes. The chamber stirred with uneasy murmurs. Duels were not uncommon among warrior species, but rarely were they proposed in the council chamber itself. Some looked at Cain with pity, expecting him to refuse outright and appear weak. Others looked with quiet curiosity, wondering whether Earth might surprise them again. Adrienne Voss had not moved since subduing the Kareth warrior. Her posture remained straight, her hands at her sides, her breathing calm and unhurried. Only her eyes shifted, meeting Vorik's with a steadiness that seemed to reach across the chamber like an unspoken challenge. Cain, however, did not waver. Earth did not come here to duel, he said firmly. We came to join this council as equals. We do not waste lives for amusement or pride. A few envoys nodded at his restraint, though others shook their heads. In the balance of diplomacy, refusal often carried as much weight as acceptance. Vorik's grin widened, sensing advantage, and then Adrienne Voss smiled. It was a small thing, so subtle that at first only those watching her closely noticed it. a faint upward curve of her lips, controlled, precise. Yet the effect was immediate. The Kareth warrior who had faced her earlier stiffened visibly, recalling the swiftness of her movements, the cold strength in her grip. Even Vorek's voice faltered for half a breath, though he quickly masked it with renewed bluster. It was not the smile of arrogance. It was not amusement or mockery. It was a smile of certainty, the quiet assurance of one who had already measured the outcome of a contest and found it inevitable. The council chamber reacted with whispers and rustling. Some envoys leaned forward, their interest sharpened. Others sat back, unsettled. That single expression had conveyed more than any threat could. Elias Kane glanced briefly at Voss, then returned his gaze to the council. His voice remained calm, but it carried with new weight. You see now why Earth does not accept duels. Our guardians are not here to fight for spectacle. They are here to prevent needless bloodshed, and they will continue to do so, no matter the threats against us. Vorek slammed his clawed fist against the railing. You hide behind words and smiles, human, but strength cannot be hidden forever. Kane inclined his head slightly. Strength is not hidden. It is simply not wasted. The presiding speaker rose once more, her expression unreadable. Enough. This council chamber is not an arena. The Kareth have spoken. The humans have answered. We will proceed with the matters at hand. Reluctantly, Vorek sank back into his seat, though his eyes never left Voss. She, in turn, did not shift her gaze from him. The faint trace of her smile lingered, calm and patient. And in that moment, every envoy who had doubted humanity felt a chill of realization. The humans had come to the stars not with armies, but with resolve. And beside their envoy stood a guardian who could stare down death itself, smiling. The presiding speaker's gavel rang lightly against the polished stone, bringing the chamber back to order. Delegates settled into their seats, but the murmurs did not fade entirely. Too many eyes lingered on the humans, on Elias Kane's composure, and, more pointedly, on the silent figure of Commander Adrian Voss. Whispers carried across the chamber like invisible currents. The envoys of the Thalrians, insectoid beings whose antennae twitched with unease, spoke in hushed tones. Did you see her move? No hesitation, no fear. She was precise. The Illyrians, elegant and long-lived, leaned toward one another. The Kareth boast of strength, but this woman, she has the calm of someone who has lived through more battles than she cares to count. Even the stoic Darak, whose stone-like features rarely shifted, muttered among themselves. The Kareth call them fragile, yet humans fight as if fragility is a challenge they refuse to accept. Elias Kane, standing at the center, could hear the whispers, though he did not acknowledge them. He had expected this. Humanity's place in the stars had never been guaranteed, not by its technology, not by its fleets, and certainly not by its history of conflict. But history, yes, history was the weight that now pressed itself into the minds of the council. For years, the elder races had dismissed the stories of humanity's rise as exaggerations told by ambitious newcomers. Tales of wars fought on their own world, of battles stretching across continents, of soldiers holding ground against impossible odds. To most, such stories were relics of a younger species struggling for identity. Yet after watching Voss disarm, a Kareth warrior with effortless calm, those stories no longer felt like myths. The Ashari speaker addressed Kane directly, her tone gentle yet probing. Envoy of Earth, you speak of peace. Yet your guardian's actions today reveal a discipline honed not by peace, but by conflict. Tell this council, what shaped your people so? Kane's answer came without hesitation. Our history shaped us. Humanity has endured centuries of hardship, of struggle, of lessons learned in fire and loss. We do not celebrate it, but we do not hide from it either. Each trial has taught us the cost of violence and the necessity of standing ready to face it. He paused, his voice steady but quiet enough that the chamber leaned closer to hear. We are not the strongest race here. We are not the oldest. But we are relentless. When struck, we endure. When challenged, we rise. And when peace is threatened, we do not abandon it lightly. The chamber stilled. His words carried no bravado, no empty claim of supremacy. They were simple truths, spoken plainly, and that simplicity made them harder to dismiss. Adrienne Voss remained motionless at Kane's side, yet her very presence reinforced his words. Every envoy could sense it. She was not a showpiece, not a symbol. She was living proof of humanity's endurance, a soldier who had clearly walked through storms and returned unbroken. Vorik of the Kareth sneered, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. You polish your past into pretty words, human. But words cannot hold ground when warriors march. Kane turned his gaze toward him, calm as ever. Perhaps. But words, when true, can stop warriors from marching in the first place. That is why I stand here. That is why she stands beside me. One without the other would fail. Together, they endure. Several envoys shifted in their seats, the meaning settling into their minds. The Kareth had tried to expose humanity as weak, yet in doing so, they had instead exposed humanity's balance, diplomat and protector, voice and shield. For the first time, the Council began to view Earth not as a reckless newcomer, but as a people forged in trial, carrying both the scars and the wisdom of their struggles. The whispers grew again, but this time they were different. Some spoke of opportunity, others of caution. A few quietly spoke of respect. And through it all, Adrienne Voss stood unmoving, her eyes scanning the chamber with the same unshakable calm. To those watching, she was more than a guardian. She was a reminder of the weight of humanity's past and of the promise that its people would never walk into the stars unprepared. The council chamber did not rest easily after Kane's words. The air was heavy, as though the weight of what had just been spoken pressed down on every delegate. Some looked at the human envoy with newfound curiosity, others with caution. Yet none could ignore him now. Vorik of the Kareth, however, could not allow his challenge to go unanswered. His pride was wounded, and his people's reputation demanded retribution. Rising once more to his full height, the bronze-plated warrior glared down at Kane with eyes burning like coals. Enough of this posturing, Vorik growled. You speak of history, of struggle, of words, but in this chamber, words mean nothing if they cannot be defended. Prove yourselves in the way of warriors. I demand a duel, my champion against your guardian. Before the eyes of the council, let us see if your protector's skill is truth or illusion. A hush spread through the chamber. The call for a duel was ancient, recognized in traditions across the stars. To refuse was not forbidden, but it was often interpreted as weakness. Elias Kane did not flinch. His expression remained calm, his voice controlled. Earth does not fight to entertain. We do not fight to soothe wounded pride. We fight only to protect, never to prove. Vorik's claws scraped against the railing, the sound like metal grinding on stone. You refuse? Then humanity reveals itself as cowardly after all. Adrienne Voss shifted slightly, her hands folding behind her back, her stance straight and composed. Her eyes fixed on Vorik, not aggressive but unyielding. The faintest hint of that earlier smile lingered at the corner of her lips, and it carried a weight that words never could. The presiding speaker raised her hand, her voice carrying like a soft bell. The duel has been offered. The refusal is given. By tradition, the matter should end. But Vorik would not be silenced. He leaned forward, his voice dripping contempt. This proves what I have said all along. Humanity hides behind shadows and smiles, too fragile to stand as warriors. They come here as children. Before Kane could respond, Voss finally spoke. Her voice was calm, quiet, yet sharp enough to cut through the noise. If humanity were as fragile as you claim, you would not be standing there to speak. The chamber stilled again. It was the first time she had spoken since arriving. The effect was immediate. Her words carried not arrogance, but certainty. Every envoy who had seen her earlier defense felt a chill. They remembered how quickly she had moved, how easily she had disarmed one of Vorex's warriors. She was not speaking idly. She was stating a truth. Vorex's lips curled, but he did not answer her directly. Instead, he turned back to Kane. So you hide behind her voice now as well? The council sees clearly, human. You are not ready to stand among us. Kane met his gaze, evenly. I stand as I always have, with words. She stands as she always has, with vigilance. This is not hiding. This is balance. Some of the envoys nodded at his words. The concept was unfamiliar to many warrior species, but it carried weight. The balance of voice and shield, of reason and defense. The presiding speaker leaned forward slightly, her expression serene. The human envoy has spoken. His guardian has acted. The Kareth have tested, and they have been answered. The council will not allow further disruption. Vorek bristled, but the weight of the chamber's attention pressed against him. To push further now would risk turning allies into critics. He sank reluctantly back into his seat, though his glare remained fixed on Kane and Voss. Kane exhaled, softly, his composure never faltering. Voss remained at his side, her presence as steady as the stars outside the chamber walls. Together they had refused the Kareth's demand without yielding ground, and as the session resumed, the lesson lingered in the minds of every envoy present. Humanity did not duel for pride. Humanity did not waste lives for spectacle. Humanity spoke with reason and stood ready to defend it with unshakable resolve. The refusal had not weakened them. It had revealed them. The council recessed as the day's session drew to a close. Delegates drifted from the chamber in clusters, their voices hushed with speculation and debate. Some discussed trade or territory, others whispered about humanity's surprising display. But every conversation circled back to the same image, the calm envoy and the silent guardian who had humbled the Kareth before the eyes of the galaxy. Elias Kane left the chamber with Adrian Voss at his side. To an untrained observer, he looked at ease, even distracted by the ornate corridors of Kortal with their towering statues and glowing murals. Yet beneath the surface, his senses sharpened. He knew prideful enemies rarely accepted defeat. So easily, and Vorek's glare still lingered in his thoughts. Too quiet. Kane murmured as they walked. Voss's eyes flicked to the shadows of the high arches, scanning every alcove and balcony. Her voice was low, but certain. They'll try again. They have to. A public failure demands a private answer. Kane adjusted his cuff, his expression calm, as though they were discussing nothing more than dinner arrangements. And you're ready for it? Her lips curved into the faintest trace of that same unsettling smile. Always. The corridors of Kortal were vast, lined with crystalline walls that caught the light of the stars beyond. Few envoys lingered here, and the hum of distant energy conduits filled the silence. It was the perfect place for an ambush. The first Kareth assassin emerged from the shadows without sound, his blade igniting in a hiss of pale fire. He lunged for Kane's back, swift, ruthless, certain. The strike never landed. Voss stepped sideways, her hand flashing out with perfect precision. The assassin's wrist cracked under her grip, the blade clattering to the floor as she twisted his arm and dropped him silently to the ground. She did not even look down at him. Her eyes were already searching the darkness ahead. 3 more figures broke from the shadows. Their weapons glowed, their armored forms moving as one. The Kareth had sent more than a lone assassin. They had sent a kill squad. Cain stopped walking, folding his hands loosely behind his back. His expression did not change. Voss moved. Her steps were soundless, her strikes controlled and efficient. The first warrior swung wide. She ducked beneath the blade, driving her palm upward into his chest and sending him sprawling into the wall. The second came from behind, but her backward kick shattered his knee before he could close the distance. The third raised his weapon high, only for Voss to seize his wrist and turn his momentum against him, slamming him to the ground where he lay stunned. It was over in less than half a minute. The only sounds were the labored breaths of the defeated, Kareth and the faint hum of their disabled blades. Voss straightened, smoothing her jacket as if nothing had happened. She glanced at Cain. As expected, Cain nodded, his voice calm. Efficient as always. One of the Kareth groaned. On the floor, attempting to rise, Voss knelt beside him, her expression unreadable. Her voice was quiet, but it carried a weight that made the corridor feel colder. You came for him. You failed. The next time you try, remember this moment before you draw your weapon. The warrior froze, his eyes wide. She released him and stood, her calm restored. Cain resumed walking, his stride unhurried. They will spin this as they always do. They will claim they were provoked. But the council will hear whispers of what happened here, and whispers travel quickly. Voss walked beside him, her gaze still scanning the shadows. Whispers are enough. The Kareth thought they could silence you. Instead, they gave us a stage. Together they walked on through the starlit corridors, leaving the broken warriors behind. To any who saw them, it appeared as though the human envoy and his aide were simply returning to their quarters after a long session. But in the shadows, the truth was written plainly. Humanity did not bow to threats. Humanity endured. Humanity defended. And those who tried to test them found not weakness, but death walking patiently at their side, smiling. By the next morning, the story had spread. No official record existed of what had taken place in the shadowed corridors of Kortal, but silence was its own kind of proof. Every envoy who passed through the halls glanced toward Elias Cain and Adrian Voss with something new in their eyes: curiosity, wariness, and in some cases, respect. The Kareth delegation, once loud and mocking, sat rigid and silent during the following council session. Their leader Vorik did not rise to challenge the humans again. His warriors, though armored and proud, seemed to shrink within their seats, their crests lowered as though weighed down by an unseen hand. They knew what the others whispered. They knew what had happened when the council adjourned. And though they would never admit it, fear had crept into the Kareth's iron pride. The presiding speaker of the Ashari addressed the chamber, her voice clear and melodic. The question before us is simple. Shall Earth be recognized not only as a member of this council, but as an equal, with full rights and responsibilities among the stars? The vote was a formality. The decision had already been made, not by numbers or treaties, but by what every envoy had seen with their own eyes. The humans had come with no armies, no fleets waiting in orbit, no banners of conquest. They had come with words, and when words were threatened, they had shown strength without cruelty, restraint without hesitation. One by one, the delegates cast their votes. Light flared across the chamber as each decision was registered. When the last envoy had spoken, the result glowed across the council walls, overwhelming approval. Elias Cain inclined his head, his voice steady. On behalf of Earth and all humanity, I thank this council. We come not to demand, but to contribute. We seek not to dominate, but to stand among you as equals. Our past has taught us much. Our future, we hope, will teach us more together. His words were simple, yet they carried more weight than speeches of twice their length. For the envoys had not only heard his voice, they had seen the truth that stood beside him. Adrienne Voss remained silent as she always did. She needed no words. Her presence alone was enough. She stood straight, calm, her eyes scanning the chamber as though nothing had changed. Yet every envoy who met her gaze felt it. The quiet, unspoken promise that Earth's envoys would never walk undefended. The Kareth remained still, their silence louder than any protest. They had attacked in arrogance, certain humanity was weak. Instead, they had found themselves humbled. To strike at Earth's diplomats now would mean risking humiliation once again, or worse. As the council adjourned, whispers spread across the chamber like wildfire. The smaller species spoke with relief, glad to see a new ally unafraid of the great powers. The older empires spoke with caution, wondering what this bold, relentless people might one day become. And even those who feared humanity could not dismiss them any longer. When Kane and Voss left the chamber, the corridors seemed different. Delegates stepped aside to let them pass. Some bowed their heads. Others simply watched in silence, memorizing the faces of the envoy and his guardian. Kane walked with the same calm stride he always had. Voss matched his pace, her hands folded. Behind her back, her expression unreadable. But there was something in the air around them now, something even the most jaded of envoys could not deny. Humanity had arrived, not as conquerors, not as victims, but as equals. Their words carried weight because they were protected by resolve. Their resolve carried strength because it was guided by words. Together, they formed something the galaxy had rarely seen before. And in time, many would come to realize what the Kareth had discovered too late. To attack Earth's diplomat was not to silence a voice. It was to invite the shadow that stood beside him, the quiet guardian whose smile promised that death itself was patient, loyal, and already waiting.